We're rolling.
Welcome to the House Dudes podcast, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Jack Haas.
And I'm Josh Koth. Here at House Dudes, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing.
So let's kick off part 2 with our chat with Mark Dolfini, the landlord coach. We're going to focus a little bit more on property managers and how to select that right one for you and how those numbers need to work. So stay tuned, and there's a lot of great content here. Well, frankly, property managers typically aren't going to care as much as you.
Right.
And so now you're kind of relinquishing some of that responsibility and some of those tasks to somebody that has to be a team member. Do you have any tips and tricks on as to how to select these type of people? I mean, there's, frankly, that's just the situation. They just don't have the skin in the game like you do.
Yeah, and I am a property manager, so I will tell you you're absolutely right. And I coach property managers as well. And I will tell you that fundamentally, so let me go back to the VIP method for just a second, okay? So let me explain that, then I'm going to answer the reason why property managers are terrible at this, okay? And you'll understand it in the context. So vision is really about what you're trying to accomplish, right? So once you get a really clear vision of your future, right? Let's say that and I use this analogy all the time, but let's say that part of your vision is to lay on the beach for 2 months out of the year, rubbing cocoa butter on your belly, right? Mm-hmm. The next piece is infrastructure.
Do you speak with experience on that? That seems a little close to home there.
Yeah. It was my white belly, showing to the sky. That's just awful, an awful visualization. Yeah. But say, let's say for argument's sake, you want to lay for 2 months let's face it, me sitting still for 2 months would be bad for the world. So no, I don't do that, but no, I do enjoy my time off. Mm-hmm. But the point is, if you have a real clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish, the next piece of the VIP method is infrastructure. Now, infrastructure involves the bones of the business, right? The desks, the chairs, the software, the computer systems, but it also involves the asset class. Right now, in the beginning, I was buying everything that was for sale. So, basically, if it had a price tag on it, as long as the numbers reasonably worked, and again, I did that wrong too. But if the numbers reasonably worked, then I would buy it. Now, a lot of the stuff I was buying was just C and D and F type properties. I mean, these were awful, right?
Right.
Well, the problem was I was buying up properties that required such a high degree of maintenance that it was attracting clientele that needed a very high degree of management.
Right.
Just wearing me out. And again, it was just bad. It was just a bad fit for me in terms of, having any sort of time off. So that's the infrastructure piece. Now, the final piece is process. Process is how you do stuff. That's the tactics that we talked about earlier, right? So now, so you've got these processes that run on the infrastructure that you built that all stays in alignment with your vision for the future, okay? Now, if you don't have enough infrastructure or process, if your infrastructure is weak, okay, let's say that you don't have a property management system, like a property management software system, right? Or your processes are not good, okay, meaning, like rents don't come in a consistent manner. You don't have a real consistent way of doing collections because there's no process for it, right? Mm-hmm. Then that has to get beefed up with people, right? So if the infrastructure or process is weak, it always shows up in one place, always. And that's poor communication. It's always related to bad communication. And I'll give you an example that's outside of real estate. Let's say we've all had bad service at a restaurant, right? It's happened, right? Well, what's the real problem? The problem is we can't communicate our order to the kitchen, right? Or the kitchen never got the order, right? That's a communication issue. That's either an infrastructure problem, meaning that there was no systematic way to make sure that the order got delivered to the kitchen. There was no negative feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
A negative feedback loop means that if something doesn't happen, how do you know? Right?
Right.
So that's why a lot of times you'll see the negative feedback loop in a lot of well-run restaurants is when you get the manager that comes around to the tables and say, how is everything tonight? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now they'll do it generally roughly about halfway into your visit, but at least it's some sort of negative feedback loop. If there's no negative feedback loop, it's left up to the customer to say, hey, where's my food? Hey, can she take our order? Or the process is bad because that waiter's got 7 tables and this waiter over here only has 2,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've all seen that. That's bad infrastructure, bad process. It means that they're either not scheduling them right, they're not parceling the work out right, or something, but it's something related to infrastructure or process. Okay. So bring that into the realm of property management companies. Most times what I see is it's generally, now you have to be in most states, and I'm pretty sure it's in all states, that you're required to have a real estate broker's license to do property management. Nearly always, this is a realtor also doing property management on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or even if it's a business, they're also doing, they're selling real estate, they're doing, they're doing property management, they'll sell essential oils. I mean, they'll do anything for money, right? They'll do
Yeah,
whatever
well,
they need.
a great example is we're seeing somebody right now who they have a cleaning service, they have a
Yep.
handyman service. So there's a lot of other companies spinning, it's all related, but it's spinning off from that core property
Yeah.
management business.
Yeah. And they're trying to be a one-stop shop,
Mm-hmm.
which, again, they're serving too many masters. It's not, they're chasing too many rabbits, so they end up catching none. So the problem is they don't have a real intentional infrastructure built around infrastructure or around process. So what ends up happening in a property management system, property management company, is that you get 1 or 2 people that are worked to death, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have, you have things that fall through the cracks.
Right.
And the infrastructure and processes, what ends up happening is, you get bad communication, you get maintenance that gets done that you didn't even know about. Again, what's the negative feedback loop? If the resident doesn't pay rent, how do you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's like, well, you never think to tell the owner that the resident didn't pay rent. Well, is that relevant for the owner to know? Absolutely, it's relevant. What's the negative feedback loop? So all these things that happen, and it's just not communicated because of bad infrastructure or bad process. And most property management companies, especially the few, there's a few that I've worked with that were good and just want to be better. But there was a couple that I've worked with that were just an absolute barn fire mess, and they didn't recognize that they really needed to be intentional about building up and developing their infrastructure and processes. Now, if you are taking that in-house and you're the one that's going to do that, yes, you're going to manage it a lot closer to the best than a property management company would. That's why I wrote the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, because you can do this and not have to be operationally involved in all the intricate details of that. In fact, I would tell you that's probably not what your skill set is. If your skill set's doing the deals and you want to grow and you enjoy doing that part of it, but you don't enjoy the landlord trap of the operational stuff,
Mm-hmm.
then that's what this teaches you. It teaches you the vision, the infrastructure, and the process method. So you're not constrained operationally.
Sure. So let's backtrack there then. Let's say a lot of people, at least when they start out, they end up self-managing these. Like what, would you recommend getting a property manager if you just have one unit, or would you what systems in place do you think are needed so that it's a successful self-management? And
Right.
how do you maintain the communication you need with the residents, but not
Right.
feeling like you have to say that? Sometimes I think that there's some level of empowerment that we could possibly give some of the residents where they could feel comfortable replacing their own light bulb, for example. You don't have to respond to every single thing, but again, it probably relies on that level of communication or something to the resident.
Yeah, and I know some some tacticians, right? Some gurus teach that the resident should be responsible for the first $50 or $100 worth of maintenance or whatever it is.
Right.
In my experience, that only works with certain asset classes.
Sure.
Because if I've got a B or A type property, generally that could work. It's also been my experience that if you're not having recent or frequent inspections on the property, people don't respect what you don't inspect. So if you're not checking the property once in a while and you go there and, let's just face it, as homeowners,
Mm-hmm.
you and I, we kind of go to the garage, we flip on the light and you're like, what's wrong with the bulb? And then you wiggle the switch and it comes on. You're okay with leaving the switch kind of, well, you have to wiggle it, you have, whatever. It's not perfect, but you know how it works.
Right.
In that situation, if I know that I'm gonna have to pay $50 or up to $50 to repair little nuanced items like that for a property that I don't own, am I really likely to do the maintenance? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want a well-maintained home, you have to be intentional about it. But again, if you budget for it, it shouldn't be a burden.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why when people like, if you're buying properties through the MLS, you're buying retail. It's like going to a Target, right? Or a
Mm-hmm.
Walmart or whatever, buying a jacket,
Right.
walking to the parking lot of that same store and trying to sell that jacket for a profit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, could you? Yeah, I suppose. But man, that's a really hard way to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're paying retail. You're paying too much. You're paying, you're basically putting it out to the world, and you're paying you're paying retail commissions to a real estate agent. And then if you're getting a mortgage from a bank, now you're paying retail for the money that you're borrowing, right? It's just really, really expensive. And then if it's any sort of renovation that has to happen, now you're paying retail to a general contractor, right? Like you're checking all those wrong boxes. I mean, it's basically you're on the wrong side of retail.
Right.
Right. So you have to make sure that you're buying properties and budgeting those individual line items. I can tell you if you're buying properties that way, I'm not saying that you can't ever get there, but it's just going to be a while before you build up enough equity in the property where the cash flow starts overtaking the other expenses that you have.
Right.
So to answer the question, I think that realistically, should they turn it over to a property manager? What's your vision? What is your vision? What are you trying to accomplish? If you can't stomach the thought of ever having to talk to a human being that's going to occupy a property, and you really don't want to manage anybody, I mean, you really want to turn it over to a property manager and kind of set it and forget it. I will tell you, as a property manager, the people that I really don't like managing for are the people that are not engaged, or the people that come in once every 6 months, question every charge from the last 6 months, and like, dude, I've sent you statements every single month and now you're questioning stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's, I will caution you that in my experience, and again, this is just my truth, and people are happy to disagree with me and show me proof otherwise, but it's rare that I find, I haven't come across anybody that has a true set and forget sort of real estate asset that generates returns without ever having to touch it, without ever having to be engaged, without ever having to make a decision. And I know people love the idea of mailbox money, and as they're counting their money from their yacht, and the Caymans. I'm just telling you that, and in my opinion, you have to be willing to manage the managers, or you have to be willing to manage the business.
Right.
Now, what does that mean? Sometimes you are going to have to call, and I would schedule depending on your level of what it is you're trying to accomplish. Maybe it means a weekly call with your property manager. In my case, I honestly think that many people can manage it by themselves, because now they become business owners, and now they're managing their assistant. Now they're managing their CPA or their attorney. Now they're managing other people that helps them make decisions. Right. And Some people just don't have the skill set or the risk tolerance for that. I get that. And that's not wrong. I'm just saying I get that. It's a good self-awareness measure to have. But I think a lot of people can manage it, especially people who are self-managing now. They can just make it better and have someone else do the stuff that they just intrinsically just aren't good at.
Sure. Well, what are your thoughts on resident managers? Having somebody on site that you might be giving them a little rent break or something to help with some boots on the ground kind of a thing.
Yeah. So if you've got a multifamily and you want to have somebody that's there on site, I would keep the transaction at arm's length. I don't think that's a bad idea. But you have to make sure that they're paying the full rent like everybody else, and you compensate them separately like everybody else. Now, with somebody that's living on site, then you may be getting into some, are they employees? Are they not employees? That's something for you to decide with your attorney or your CPA. But I like the idea just because, heck, if they're willing to take that on, then they've got an actual person on site that can manage that sort of stuff. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I would have the expectations very clearly drawn, and I would also have the compensation very clearly drawn. But I would separate the fact that they're a resident from the fact that they're basically working for you. I would separate those two roles completely, because that water can get muddied very, very quickly.
Okay. No, that's a good point. So, gee, we went almost double the time that I told you it was probably going to, and I had a feeling that was going to be the case. But you got to admit, I warned you.
Yeah, that's fine. I just hope that people that are watching this aren't bored to tears.
No, I'm sure not. So we could just keep going here, but right now, is there any questions that you think we probably should have asked here today that?
No, I think, I know sometimes my questions or my answers to your questions seem a little vague because, again, I always ask the people, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What are some things that people can do? And I'm not trying to be self-serving. I promise you, if you buy my book through Amazon, I'm not making a ton of money. And just basically it's really more about, most of the money goes to Amazon, unfortunately. But if you buy the book, The Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, this is what it looks like. So if you buy that book, there's a lot in there. And if you're not a reader, it is available on Audible as well. But if you buy the book, I think it's a really good way for you to get started, even if you have no intention of managing the property yourself. It's going to make you an expert in the VIP method. And then when you start to see other businesses that don't run well, you're going to recognize why. And here's the problem with infrastructure and process, that when a system is running well, it's very hard to notice, right? It's not until something's either non-existent or broken that you even notice, right? Like think of a toll gate, right? You drive up to the toll, you throw your quarter in, and the gate doesn't go up, right? That's obviously an infrastructure problem. Something's broken with the infrastructure. So now the cars are all backed up behind you. Everybody's honking. No one can get over. It's a mess, right? So it's not until it's broken or non-existent, like basically, let's say, there's some issue that's going on and there's no mechanism to fix the problem, right? Let's say, for argument's sake, that there's no one there tending to the toll gate that can come over and hit a button and make the arm go up, right? Let's say no one is there to fix that because they relied on it being automated. Well, that's a problem, right? Now it's non-existent. So now you've either got a broken infrastructure or you've got a non-existent infrastructure, or a non-existent process, right? Or a broken process. So that's why I say, it's really hard for me to answer these questions real specifically, because not everybody's going to have the same skill set, risk tolerance, stuff like that. But I think if you did read the book or listen to the Audible, it's going to make you start to think in a new way. It's going to start to make you think specifically, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What is your vision? What's this all for? And when you can start getting really, really clear on what it is you're actually doing this all for, all of a sudden that becomes your true north to make all decisions by. And you can then look through that lens anytime an opportunity comes up and says, hey, is this opportunity going to bring me closer to my vision, or is it going to bring me further away? If we're going on a road trip from Detroit to Key West, because our vision is to sit on a beach chair drinking cold drinks, watching the sun go down, and a good goal along the way from Detroit to Key West is Indianapolis, Chattanooga, Atlanta, right? We've got goals along the way. But let's say we're halfway between Indianapolis and Chattanooga, and you say, hey, you know what? I got this buddy who lives in St. Louis. We should totally go hang out with him. I haven't seen him since the third grade. He'd be a blast.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to say, Jack, dude, that's literally completely in the opposite direction. It's going to take us completely away from our vision. Like, no, like, let's stay focused on our vision. Let's get to our vision. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sort of thing that when you get really hyper focused, it gives you that ferocity of purpose that nothing else in the world matters except getting to that vision. So that's why I would say, get really, really clear on your vision. And if you're having struggles, I'm happy to have a conversation with people, because this is something I'm really, really passionate about. And I really believe that the real estate space is really missing this piece because we're all so tactically driven.
Right. No, I can't thank you enough, Mark. This was a great conversation. In fact, it kind of changed some perspective or refocused a few things for me. I really appreciate that. If people did want to reach out to you, where would they find you?
Generally, I'm on Facebook. You can find me at My Landlord Coach. My logo looks like this, so I'm pretty easy to find. I've got a YouTube channel, but if you want to just drop me an email and you'd like to have a discovery session and just kind of a strategy session, my email's mark@landlordcoach.com. It's pretty simple, mark@landlordcoach.com. And you can reach out to me then. I'm happy to have a conversation really with anybody. I'm not a strong sales kind of guy, and I recognize I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But I am passionate about making sure that people are heading in the right direction. It's rare that I talk to somebody that doesn't want to make their world better, and they want to do that by having some time freedom and by having a little bit extra money. It's rare that I don't talk to someone that wants to give more back to their community, or spend more time at their church, getting a closer relationship with God. Like, how could I not get wrapped up in that? How could I not want to be passionate about that? So right. If you'd like to have a conversation, I'd be happy to have that with anybody.
And I would highly encourage people to do so. So thank you again. It was great chatting with you. I'll make sure to include those links in the show notes. But really appreciate your time, and I hope we can do it this time, not wait a year and have you chat again sometime.
Very good. Well, thanks, Jack. It was a pleasure.
We've put a lot of effort into providing useful content, and if you found value in the show and have any interest in supporting us with a small donation, head over to patreon.com/housedudes.
And if you have any thoughts or questions, shoot us an email at info@housedudes.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @housedudes. And if you like what you're hearing, head over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps other investors out there find the show.
And remember, massive positive impact requires
massive positive action. We'll see you next time. This episode was brought to you by housedudes.com. Do you have time to actively manage flipping and rentals yourself? If so, go for it. If you live in a market that won't cash flow or don't have the time to do all the work, are you just out of luck? If there was a way to participate more passively, would that appeal to you? I'm sure you have questions about how the process works and what to do next. If that's the case, fill out the form on housedudes.com/investors, and we'll reach out to see if you are a good fit for our business. This is first come, first serve, and we will have to stop taking applications when our goals are met. See you at housedudes.com/investors.
I don't like to tell a man what to do with his money, but if you ain't investing in property, then you're dumber than a dummy.
I'm not dumb. I'm smart.
Well, buy property. That's my advice.